Good afternoon. Thank you for watching Once and Often. I'm Jasmine. Joining me today is New Jersey's spoken word artist, Lost Child. Mr. Lost, how are you today?
I'm good in yourself.
I'm doing well, thank you. Lost, like myself, you have a very similar story of adoption, or were you just forced through?
I was, I guess technically both. I was fostered for like the first 2 months, I believe. The story is still kind of shaky. I've never really gotten the whole full breakdown, but somewhere around a month or two, I was adopted. And then that's the family that I've been with. But I was one or two foster homes for the first month or two, and then after that, I was adopted.
But you were adopted very early,
Yes,
1, 2 months or something like that, and you still don't know that story?
I've gotten conflicting stories. It's yeah. Apparently, there's information that's out there that I still haven't quite reached and found. But yeah, at some point somehow I found the adoption agency, but then the story that the adopted family's telling me doesn't match up with the information that the agency is telling me. So somebody's not telling the truth, but I can't really ask or find out for sure who.
I don't know why that angers me so much. I can't understand why people can't be truthful to adoptees when it comes to us wanting to know who we are, where we come from, and all the. Oh my God, I don't. It angers me that information can be withheld. It's like
Yeah,
when really all you want to do is just know. So,
right.
what was the story behind why you were placed in adoption, for adoption?
Well, I don't know the story why I'm still looking for my mother. I have a name that I got from the agency, but that name hasn't led me to anything solid as far as finding her. I did a couple of the DNA test, 23 and Me and Ancestry, and I ended up finding my biological father. Even though he had passed back in 2014, I found him in 2021. I found out who he was in 2021. But of course, couldn't ask him any questions, so that didn't really help narrow down the search for her. Um,
Wow. Did you find any siblings?
yeah, I do have a half sister from his side. Actually, there's two sisters. There's one about 8 years younger than me that I found that I have a current relationship with. She lives about 20 minutes away up in Patterson. And there's an older sister from another woman 4 or 5 years before me. And his family remembers the relationship that he was in and that child that came from that relationship. But you know, when people break up and they move out of state, they cut
Mhm.
off ties with the ex and the ex's family. So they know that there's a niece or a cousin out there somewhere. They just, no one has a way to get in contact with her.
So, okay, so how old are you now?
Now I am 47. I got to think about it. My birthday's at the end of the month. I'm trying to start calculating the day. Am I counting that yet or am I not? I'm 47. I'll be 48 at the end of the month.
So you'll be 48. You have not found your biological mother. And when you learned of your biological father, he was already deceased. So
Yes.
you still have a ton of unanswered questions.
Yes. 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 Yes.
So what information did your adoptive family, what were they able to give you any information? Like where
Nah,
you, nothing?
they like I didn't know I was adopted till I was 12. And when they told me at 12 years old, it was kind of like it was like a one and done conversation. Like, oh yeah, by the way, we forgot to tell you something, and they just kind of left it at that. And there was never any room beyond that to ask questions or come back on it. I specifically was told, like, it was a Friday. I specifically remember when they told me it was a Friday night, and when they told me, I don't even remember exactly what was said other than, oh yeah, you know, when you were a baby, we adopted you. And at some point I fell out on the floor crying. I don't remember what else was said after that. And I just remember when the mother told me, okay, that's enough. And I know when she said that's enough, it meant to get up and stop crying and get yourself together. So I got up, I left and went in the room and got in the bed, pulled the covers up. I cried myself to sleep and woke up the next morning, of course, still crying. And when I walked in the room in the kitchen, like it was a Saturday morning, so they were cooking breakfast and getting ready. It was just the mother and the father. There were no other siblings. It was just me in the house with them. And I remember she specifically told me, nah, you're not gonna be walking around here acting like something wrong with you. Fix your face and act right. And that was the last conversation we had about it.
Wait, time out. Oh, that's heavy. You said the last conversation y'all had about it. What?
Until I brought it back up, I was somewhere in my 30s, and I brought it back up.
See, I spoke with Coco, the black adoptee the other day. Coco. I feel like on Instagram we all know each other, like we all brothers and
She
sisters somewhere.
she is the first adoptee that I found.
Oh, really? Isn't she dope?
Coco is she is my pinnacle. She is my, and Coco, she knows this. When she sees my interviews and I watch hers, and then we talk privately. But she knows. My ex-girlfriend saw a post of hers, and it was something related to adoption, because I was always talking in current years. I talk about it. Everybody knows it's part of my poetry. It's part of my personal life. So an ex-girlfriend, she said it was a post. I don't even remember which post of Coco's from a couple years ago. And it was something that we had talked about. And she was like, yo, she's saying the same thing that you were just telling me about. And when I looked at it, I'm like, yo, it's an adoptee. And I just said this the other day. And when I went to her page, it was just adopted. It was just all the stuff that I had in my head. Someone had said it as well and was putting it on Instagram. And
she?
Yeah, me and Coco have been inseparable. Yes.
She's so dope. Hey, Coco, she's so dope. And she and I spoke the other day, and she mentioned just how taboo the whole topic of adoption is. And it's like always a hit and miss. Like you can, like the talk you had. Oh, you're adopted, by the way. Are you hungry? And it's kind of like no one understands unless you are adopted, you're not going to relate to us. Unless you are adopted, because when you come from your biological family, the family who raised you, and you know them, you're never going to understand the emotions that adoptees carry. So, when you say the conversation was just kind of like, all right, this is it, but ain't gonna be none of that crying and carrying on around here. You get up off that floor. How come you were not able to live in that moment is what I wish I could ask. How come you were not able to live in that moment? How come you were not able to talk about that moment and ask questions? And then you wait until nearly 20 years later to have the conversation again. Like, hey, I remember when I was 12, we had this talk, but can we talk about it again? What was that like when you brought it back up in your 30s?
I don't remember. I pretty much opened it just the way you did, and I don't remember where it went, but I know by the time it was over, I was cussing and fussing and knocking over furniture on my way out the house.
Yeah.
And I don't talk to them at all. Well, the father, he passed away back in 2021 or something like that. But I don't deal with them at all.
So with your adoptive mother, is she still living?
Yeah, she's still living.
And that relationship is estranged?
If that's the word, yeah.
Yeah. Like if you're out of touch with her, then yeah. And has she tried to reach out to you? I mean, like, how can you be
that? Like the way I explain it to people, and I know people hate hearing me say it, but I wasn't a child. I wasn't raised to be a child. I was their pet. Like people clothe their pets, people feed their pets, they provide a roof over their head for their pets, but they never set their pet up to ever be independent, to leave and live on its own. Their pet always stays with you and under you until either you or the pet dies, and that's exactly how they raised me.
Are you serious? So were you, when you were growing up, even before and after you learned of your adoption, did you ever feel adopted?
I won't say I felt adopted. I remember I was maybe like 10, and I had just gathered in my little young brain that, okay, I got the mean mommy. Because I was looking at my aunts and my cousins, and I'm like, don't nobody else's mother treat their kids the way she treat me. Like, don't nobody else have to deal with whatever. And I'm like, all right, I didn't think anything of it. I just was like, all right, I got the mean. Out of all of her sisters, she's the mean one. She's mean to the rest of the kids, but she's super mean to me. But it's because I got to live with her. They get to see her just in passing here and there, but I got to come home with her. And I just understood that, yeah, she's just the mean one out of her sisters. And I just took it as, I didn't look at it any different. I didn't think any. So, of course, from 12 years old forward, like my first thought was, you're not even my mother. Why? You're not only the way you treat me, you beat me, you do like everything you do, but you're not even my mother. Like you're not even supposed to put. Yeah, it's supposed to be. If I'm the thing that you couldn't have, you supposed to. I would think you're loving and caring and adoring and uplifting, but nah, it was none of that. And so after 12 years old, it really started sinking in, and like my teenage years, we were 2 steps away from throwing blows every conversation we had. And that was just my reality. I didn't know any other adoptees, so I didn't know that there was another way to do it. I thought this just was what it was, and I'm gonna do these few little years, and once I'm grown, I'm leaving the house and I'm never coming back.
Yeah, and you did that?
Yes.
Yeah. So with when you said she couldn't have children, so she dealt with infertility issues. Was that on her part or your adoptive father's or both?
I learned within the last year or two that it was her. She was the one that couldn't.
Do you think, because I know stories like this that happens where the adoptive mom is unable to have children, but daddy, he was still swinging, hunching, and making kids. Do you know that if he had any other biological children?
Nah, like the ill part about like the whole, I constantly think about the what they say, the cards that you're dealt in life, and just having to play those cards out. I've realized in the last few years that both of them had mental disabilities. Like I didn't realize he couldn't read until I was like 16 years old. Um, and she has certain parts of her mentality, certain parts of her intelligence just don't go where they're supposed to go. So they were a perfect match together. They both had issues that nobody else would be willing to deal with, but they were willing to deal with each other on their own. So he never stepped out. He was a child in the house as well.
Wow.
2 children and an adult. And at 14, 15 years old, like I used to have to wrestle with the idea of like, yo, I'm the smartest person in this house, but that can't be right. Like
Yeah.
I understand health disorder now, but at 15 years old, I didn't understand it. And I couldn't figure out why I knew stuff that it didn't seem like neither one of them were catching on to. But at the end of the day, I got to listen to what they say, but it's not making sense. And it wasn't even the adoption thing. It was just regular family stuff, just like regular everyday life stuff. I was trying to make decisions for school. I knew I was a smart kid. And I was good with my hands. And so I figured, okay, I want to learn how to do stuff, but I want the education as well, but I still want to learn how to do carpentry and electrical and learn how to use tools or whatever. And everything that I wanted to do, they were just like, nah, you ain't got to do that. Nah, you don't need to go over here. Nah, you don't need to do this. Nah, you don't need to do that.
Were they originally from New Jersey or were they from some parts of the South?
Southern, but from New Jersey. Yeah. From I think the family history that I know of is from somewhere in the South, and then the grandparents came from the South to Jersey, and they were in South Jersey, and then in their lifetime they moved from South Jersey and then moved up to North Jersey. But yeah, definitely Southern, and that Southern slow mentality.
Yeah, exactly. And that was exactly my reason for asking, because I feel like they have a different mentality. I feel like, when it comes to, and I know it may not sound nice to say, but people, and it's not people in the South, but the older generation from
Right.
the South, I feel like there's a disconnection between reality for them and the rest of the world, because there's no reason why you would sit here as an adult now and say I was treated as a pet. I mean, because when I don't have any pets, we didn't grow up with pets, but as I imagine what a pet is supposed to do, a pet is just supposed to be quiet and be taken care of and not have any emotions. But as we see, there are some fur parents, I guess if you want to say, who absolutely love on their pets better than most parents can love on even their biological children. I mean, so I don't understand the whole pet reference and how you can raise someone not to speak, not to do for themselves, not to be independent, and so many other things. But then when you are of age and you have to get out here in this world, you are then what? The lost child?
That's where it came from.
Exactly what I thought. Exactly what I thought.
And
Go ahead.
it's like the whole pet thing really hit me when like I wasn't allowed to have pets when I was a kid. And I never realized, like, okay, shit, now I see I wasn't allowed to have a pet because I was the pet. And it really didn't register with me until I had my first dog. And I had my dog in the house. And I'm like, oh, he got all these toys spread out all over the floor. Like every time I went to Walmart, I had to buy him a toy, just something, another chew toy. So he had a room full of chew toys. He had his own room because I had an extra bedroom, and so it just became his room. He ate the best dog food, and I was holding in my hand one day. I had his lineage, and I had his all the way back to his great grandparents, and it hit me. Wow. I'm like, everything, the lifestyle that my dog has, I didn't have.
Right.
Like I know my dog's lineage, but I don't know my own.
Right.
And I could parallel. He eats good. He's roof over his head. He has what he needs, but I'm not asking him what he wants to eat. I'm just giving him food to eat. I'm not asking him what he wants to do tomorrow. He does whatever I do. When I say we leave, and we leave. If I say you stay in the house, you stay in the house. And to this day, like when the few family members that I've talked to in these recent last 3 or 4 years, they're like, you were so quiet as a kid. Even into my 20s, people say like when you came around, you just never talked. Like, and y'all thought that was normal.
So you couldn't talk back then, but now you're a whole spoken word artist.
And I don't want to say I'm the black sheep of the family. I'm blacklisted. No one is it's 3 or 4 people that talk to me, but for the most part, people that I know my entire life just won't talk to me no more because I'm talking too much now.
Yeah. Well, see, ding, 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 ding. That I don't think people understand, especially when you find that adopted community, that community of people full, with stories of adoption, being in foster care, going from home to home or what have you. I don't think they realize what that is for us. And I said this the other day talking to Coco, and I say time and time again, because everyone lives in ignorance, you can't even empathize with a person who grew up not knowing who they came from, where they came from, or anything like that. Like in 2010 is when before I left New York in 2009 is when I called my biological mother, called her out the blue, found her number. When I learned her name, called her. She told me I had the wrong number. The following year, I had written her a letter. She responded to, but she called first. And then I spoke to her on the phone the following day for the first time. So you figure at the time, I'm 31. Yeah, I'm 31 years old. And even now, as we sit here, I'm 45. I still have no idea who my biological father is. If he's deceased, if he's living, no knowledge. And when you don't have that information, that's really ours. It's not even like we're asking anybody for anything that we're not supposed to have. I'm asking for my information. And, everyone lives in ignorance. Well, why do you want to know that? I don't know. What you're going to do? What you mean? So when you have those questions and when you are quiet on the issue, now that you are a man of liberated, now that you can speak and use your experience being an adopted child in your spoken word, people look at you like, now he's doing the most. No, he's not. He's healing. So for all of you ignorant people out there who are also stupid, and I know, we teach kids, that's a bad word. No, it's a real word, because you are able to now tell your story the way you want to tell it. And people will look at you like you're the bad guy. No, you're not. Right. It's like, have you ever thought to yourself, because this is something that I wrestle with, have you ever thought to yourself how much different your life would have been had you not been adopted? And is there anyone you blame for your experience?
I mean, at this point, like I try. I think they say we all have created our what they call it, the ghost family in our minds, and we imagine who our parents could have been, and imagine the life that we could have lived. And I mean, I would like to think, from the information that I have, it seems like there's a possibility that my mother had a daughter 4 years before me, that she sent back home to my great grandmother in Jamaica. So, and then according to the documents that I got, she had a miscarriage in 75, and then she had me in 76. So I don't know if it was drugs. I don't know if she was just out here in these streets and she was just young and was just enjoying her life and living it and doing her thing. From the information that I have, and I got to keep saying it that way because I don't know if the facts and what's just written and what was just told to me. But my mother was supposedly somewhere around 25 when I was born. My father, whom I found through ancestry, and I know through this man is biologically my father. He would have been, when I did the math, in his mid 40s when I was born. So if he was 45, 46, she was 25. They weren't in a relationship. I wouldn't. So it was just, I don't know if she was just doing a little something for some change, or she just, old dude, he had some extra money and he was just like, let's see what's happening. And they did what they did. And then it wasn't a relationship. Like, I've talked to his family. And like I said, the older sister, his family knows the older sister's mom because it was a relationship that he was in and he brought around the family. My younger sister, the family knows her because that was a relationship that he brought around the family. So he brought his relationships around family. No one remembers him being in a relationship around that time in the middle where I came in. So I would like to think that it could have been a whole lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't loving and caring. It was the image of love and care, but behind closed doors was something totally different. The one thing I can say I definitely missed out on was sexual molestation. Nobody was touching on me. Pretty much dealt with everything else, the beating and the mental abuse and just like I said, and then the stuff that I did to myself just as a teenager and as a young adult, just not knowing left from right, up from down. It's the cards that I've been dealt. I always say you can't cry about spilled milk. I don't. It could have been worse. It could have been better. I didn't have the absolute worst situation, but it even the situation that I was in, like I tell people, the unbelievable side of, I was having sex at 10 years old. I was drinking liquor at 10, 11 years old. I was doing what I wanted to do because nobody was paying me any attention. Nobody was telling me what to and what not to do. So I was just, and I was getting away with it, which that's where I was like, okay, I can't be this smart that neither one of them will realize what I'm doing. And it could have been worse, but it wasn't the greatest.
Oh my God. So when you say it could have been worse, because in hindsight, when you look back, you see that there was a level of neglect. How are you doing all of this at 10 years old? You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you doing? Like, who's not watching you and paying attention to a 10-year-old?
There were times where they were in the house, and then there was a lot of times I was just left home alone. So it wasn't like just while they were out. There were times where the adults were in the room drinking and having a grand old time, and me and somebody's daughter was downstairs in the basement playing.
Oh. So what is the age gap between you and your adoptive parents?
They are about 25 years. They
So
weren't,
they were roughly the same age as your biological mother.
yes.
So that didn't even make them old. And my reason for asking that is because, those when they are of a certain age, they don't tend to pay much attention to the kids. It's just kind of like they're down there playing. But I mean, at 25, you tend to be a little bit more attentive because, you're kind of like still living a life too. But they weren't even watching what you were doing at 10 years old.
And that's why I say in hindsight, I realized there's some developmental disabilities that were there. And I think a lot of that from the family members, because there's no way the other family, the adults, the aunts, the sisters didn't know that their sister and brother-in-law had some issues. And I think they covered it in a lot of ways. And a lot of the stuff was covered and overlooked. But when I was in the house and nobody else was around, nobody was overlooking what was going on in the house behind closed doors.
So how long has it been? I know you stated your adoptive father is now deceased, but what was the conversation? What was your last conversation like with him and your adoptive mother?
The last conversation with him was when he was in a hospital dying, because I had gotten a word that he was getting sick, and I just refused to call. And then he was in the hospital, and one of the cousins was at the hospital, and she called me and just put him on the phone. And prior to that, we didn't have anything to say, so I didn't have anything to say in that moment either.
Yeah.
And in hindsight now, I kind of feel bad because I think it was more her than it was him. He's never stood up to her, on behalf of me, at least. I've heard in recent years that there's those last few years, there was some things going on in their life and he decided to go left and she went right, and he stood on his ground and stayed left. But I've never seen that from him in relation to me. Like there were times where I know specifically there was a time I got a beating for leaving a fork in the sink, a single fork. She was one of them clean up, don't leave nothing in the sink, don't whatever. And I came home from school, he came home from work, and she came home last. Somehow a fork ended up in the sink. I know I hadn't had anything to eat, and I told her I did not have anything to eat. It's only one other person in this house. But he said nothing, and he sat there and watched her beat me for having that fork in the sink. So that was about maybe I want to say 12, 13 years old. And that's at that point, I was kind of like done with him, and I figured I was on my own in this thing. But it's so from that point all the way up into adult life, there was no relationship with him and I as like grown men. Okay, I'm an adult now. We can go fishing and have a great time and just be men, father and son together. It wasn't, and I want to say she took that away from him, because him and I could have had that, and I'm sure he probably would have did a whole lot more talking and telling, but he would not go against whatever she said, so he kept his mouth shut. So he chose to live underneath of that umbrella of nonsense. So I left him and her over there by themselves.
That's see, I know of men who are afraid of their wives. You know,
Yes.
who will absolutely let the wife make every decision, whether financial, whether vacation, whatever decision. And I know men who are seriously like, okay, well, I'm not going to say anything. I mean, even when it comes to him being able to speak up against actions of his wife that he doesn't like, afraid to speak up, but we'll talk about it with other people. So it makes me wonder, like, where does that level of fear come from as it relates to a spousal relationship? What was your last relationship like with her? I mean, your last conversation.
I was able to compose myself this last time. No fussing, no flipping out and knocking over furniture, but it was just like, oh, I know more than you've ever told me now. When I come to you now and I ask you specific questions, I know some of the answers. So when you purposely and intentionally lie to me, I know you're lying. So it would just work for you to just tell me what you know. And like, I've caught her in bold-faced lies before, recent conversations here. So it just got to the point where she would just play the I don't remember, I don't recall. And that's fine. And it just shows to me how important I am not to you in your life, because I can't talk to a mother who don't remember how many hours she spent in labor, and if the baby had to stay in the hospital, and when she came home, if the baby came home with it, and the first time you came home, you slept in the crib or you slept in the bed with me for the first week, and then we finally put you, they remember those things because it's important to them. It means something to them. You claim you don't remember nothing. You don't remember when I came home. You don't remember if I had any physical issues or ailments or what my temperament was like. None of the stuff that I'm asking you, you claim you don't remember. And even the day that you brought me home, there's a debate between, you say you brought me home 2 or 3 days right out of the hospital. The paperwork says I was 3 or 4 weeks old. The baby book that you wrote in your own handwriting, we brought him home on this day, is the date that matches the paperwork. But you keep telling me another date. So which is it? What you're saying now or what you wrote then? It's an obvious lie. I know it's a lie, but you just keep running the lie. Like when I asked her about paperwork, every other adoptee that I've talked to, their parents gave them paperwork either at 18 and they said, you can read it, it's all yours, or they knew their entire life and was able to look at it, or some way or they found it when their parents died and they were going through paperwork. There's some paperwork with them right now. They bought lawn mowers 20 years ago. There's a file in the cabinet that has every book of instructions and receipt paper from stuff that they bought over the last 30, 40 years. You mean to tell me you bought all of this stuff? You got all of this paperwork for all of this stuff, but you bought a whole human child and you have no work? I'm the only adoptee that doesn't have paperwork. And she swore up and down she didn't have paperwork. And I kept drilling the point that I am the only one that's never had paperwork. What's wrong with that picture? And then she finally broke down and was like, okay, well, there was some paperwork, but when we sold the old house and moved into the new one, I found it and I just threw it in the trash.
Wait a minute. Hold up. First of all, that's not even information you would throw away. That's first of all. That's not information that you would typically throw away. Secondly, what is her response when you look at her in her face and say, why are you lying? Because you have to ask that question at some point. Why are you lying? What is her response to why lie? Like, really?
Now I'm the devil and I'm full of the devil. Now it becomes a religious thing. So.
Ooh. I don't get it. I honestly don't get. When I learned so the thing with me, when my adoptive mom, she told me when I was young, she told me why she was, my father didn't even want me to know. My father was down for me. My parents had 5 biological children between the two of them. And I was their first adoptee. and then they adopted 2 more, fostered probably 40, give or take. But my mom was just always very open to talk about my adoption. You know, she was kind of like, hey, this is this, your brother's here. You know, I know you have an older sister. She stayed with the family. You know, your mother had an addiction. She gave me everything I wanted to know. But she used to keep our information in this old brown raggedy suitcase. I was 30. Yeah, I was 30 when I left New York, and she still had this suitcase. And it was kind of like, and we're just sitting there talking. She was like, well, how come you haven't found anything? Mommy, what do you mean? How come I haven't found anything? I did not sign any adoption papers. I did not hire an attorney. So she pulls out this suitcase. At that time, she finds a medical document, and she uses her fingernail. She just scratches off the white out because, you know, that was the way to keep secrets back in the day. You don't want anyone to know. White it out, baby. She scratched it off, and it was at that time that I learned my biological mother's first name. She was like, you have to find her. So my mom was very supportive in that aspect. But again, to your point, and what I'm trying to figure out is why would she say she threw that information away? Because I was 30 years old and my mom still had that information. You know, all of it was medical, all that information. My mom was just like, here. She would have given it to me much sooner, I'm sure, but it was never a topic. It was nothing that we ever really discussed. So you're saying you threw that information away. First of all, it's not even your information to throw away. It's yours. Why would you throw something like that away? And if you didn't throw it away, again, why are you lying? Why is that? That's not information you would throw away. I don't understand that. That's so.
Why I gave up. I have nothing to say. You ain't got to talk about nothing. When you die, don't nobody need to send me an invitation because I'm not coming. I could care less at this point.
Yeah. And when was your last conversation with her? Like, how long ago was that?
That was about 2 years ago. About a year and a half. I'm going on 2 years now.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy because Coco mentioned, you know, her relationship with her adoptive father is now deceased, and the relationship with her and her adoptive mom is now estranged. They haven't spoken in about 3 years. And I think the most touching part and the most hurtful part is that even though you're not my biological mother, you were the person that I've always called mom. And now we are at this point because you are withholding information that is rightfully mine. And I just can't wrap my mind around why an adult would adopt a child just to treat them this way. Like, what is your real issue? And so Coco mentioned the other day when we spoke, she said, it's not that they wanted you, they just wanted a child, you know? So it's kind of like when you don't turn out to be what they want you to be, and when you don't follow their footsteps and do what it is they want you to do, what they want you to be, you know, now you become blacklisted. I'm never going to understand that. I'm never going to do you have children of your own?
Yes, I have a daughter. She's 23 now.
Okay. And she knows the whole situation of your adoption story.
Yeah, like and she knows grandma. Like I never took that from them. And right. And that, the weirdest things, like she's great to her. They have their relationship outside of me. I never interfered with because that was one of the things that I kind of peeped and really started chewing on, because I'm like, she's great to my daughter. She's great to my older female cousins. I don't remember her being real cool or real special specifically to any of the boy cousins. And it led me to ask her, did you choose me, or was I just the next thing that came down the line?
Yeah. And
I had this like pulling hen teeth trying to get information out of her. But basically, I hear some people say how the adopted parents, they went and they had like a booklet, or they said they have some babies that are expected, and these are the parents and these are the characteristics of the parents or whatever. They didn't do any choosing process. They just got a phone call one day and said, hey, we have a baby. I was the next thing down the line, and I really believe she wanted a girl, but just accepted whatever the first thing that came was me. She never wanted a boy, so she treated me like she didn't want me, but she did. She's never been able to just say that I didn't want you, I wanted a girl.
So my problem with that is that had she waited another week or so, there would have been a girl born, or right. even another day, you know, because I don't understand, like my mom and dad, and it's so crazy because I learned recently just from the Instagram community that parents have decided, oh, I want a fair skinned baby with this type of hair. I didn't even know that was a thing. I knew, yeah. I knew when my parents adopted me, they had 3 boys and 2 girls. So they went in with the intentions of, we wanted another girl. So, and then here I am, and they brought me home when I was just 10 days old, taking me to Long Island from Brooklyn. And, Long Island is home for me. But it's just kind of like, I don't understand why you can not say, no, I'd rather wait for a girl. Because if that's the chosen gender that you believe you can authentically love on, why give that fake love to a child who did not ask for this situation? And no one understands. We are not born saying, who's going to adopt me? We're pre-verbal. No one is able to speak up for this child. And then when you have 2 parties, like I said to Coco the other day, the parents, the biological parents or the biological mom, and the adoptive family who makes a decision to give up the child and to take in the child now has to suffer, grow up, and become 45-year-old Jasmine and 47-year-old Loss. And all of these questions still reside in our head. And we are now parents of our own. How come the world does not understand this? How come the state does not understand this? Because especially, and it's even worse sometimes for foster children, because they go from home to home to home to home to home to home. There's no reason why a child is 8 years old. I spoke with Dre Van Lund about a month or so ago. And this young man told me, I think by the time he was 8, and I don't want to get it wrong, but I think he was roughly 8 years old, and he had already been in like 12 different homes.
Yeah.
That's nonsensical to me. I don't understand why it is that we have all of these questions and we have to carry the burden because of someone else's neglect. Whether you neglected to care for me as my biological parent or whether you neglected to give me the information that's rightfully mine as my adoptive parent. Why do we have to carry that burden? And so your outlet, I take it, was poetry.
Actually, not really. I didn't really start performing and mentioning much about it poetically until like the last few years. Poetry was just something that kind of came, and I would vaguely say things like, I think in one of my earlier poems, there was a line, something like, I am descended from that which I know not directly, but my complexion and hair texture point me in an undeniable direction. And then I just went off on something else. So I would vaguely say stuff like that, but I never specifically said until I say the last 2 years that I really started actually saying in poems, I'm adopted. I don't know whatever. And that's because I explained the name Lost Child and how it came about now, but I didn't start doing that until, like I said, a couple of years ago. But the poetry thing just kind of came about accidentally in my late 20s, early 30s. And it just kind of evolved into something that I didn't realize. I had never had therapy because obviously it was something I wasn't supposed to talk about was going on. So I didn't even know that therapy was a normal thing for people in our situation because it's a lot going on in our heads, especially when we're not allowed to talk about it. We need to talk about it with someone. At 15, 16, you're dealing with the hormones and emotions and everything else is going on in a teenager's mind and life. And then you got to deal with this dark secret that you're holding on to that you know. And I'm looking at my cousins like, do they know? I'm looking at my aunts like, do they know? So when I came around family and I didn't talk, it's because I got all these questions in my head that I can't ask. I don't want to talk about what's going on in school. I don't want to talk about the new sneakers that I might want because I got more important stuff. So instead, I can't say that. I'm just saying nothing at all, which is why I was so quiet around the family. But the poetry thing came at 30. So now I was finally like saying slick ways. I was dropping hints about it. But I know people weren't catching it, but just me saying it was getting it off my chest. So I was telling a room full of strangers stuff that I had been holding on to for 25, 30 years. And that was the relief, the therapeutic aspect for me.
And you're so right. You're so right. Because for the viewing audience, this gentleman and I have never had a conversation before right now. I hit him up on Instagram like, hey, Lost, can we talk? This is who I am. This is just a piece of my story. Prior to what you're watching right now, we had never met, but we are open to share our stories with each other because we share that commonality. And I think that it's so much easier for us to talk about it amongst each other and with each other. And it's so therapeutic to do that because we can understand each other opposed to being, like you said, 14 and 15 years old. Are you adopted? No. Because what am I going to say?
Right,
what am I going to say? Me saying I'm adopted meant, so your family didn't want you? No, they didn't. I don't know the story, the full story behind it, but no, and so when we meet each other, like you and I have just met, we are open to talk. What did I ask you? I'm like, is there anything you don't want to discuss? You're like, no, because people don't understand how therapeutic it is for us to absolutely finally share that transparency and fully open up, even if it is to a stranger, but you are a stranger who's adopted, like I'm a stranger to you who's also adopted. So now we can chat it up because now we can relate to each other in that way. Whereas, like, why do you want to find your family? That question to me, and it's not a question that my mother had ever asked, because my mother was so game for us finding our biological families and things like that. So she's always going to be the GOAT for that. But other people who, like, how come you never talked about it? What am I going to say when you can't relate to me? And then you also deal with the fact that, think about the fact that even biological siblings, how they make fun of their own brother or sister who's younger. You're adopted. Why? Because that conversation, or for a child to feel like they are adopted, is something that they hold on to. So you would tease your younger sibling and make fun of the younger sibling, and tell them the untruth because you just want to pick with them. Well, what do you think that does to those of us who are adopted? And like I said to you a moment ago, when my sister decided, oh, we're going to fight tonight, and made the comment, you're my mother, to my mother, it was like, oh, wow, I'm 31 and now I realize I'm not a biological member of the family. And then to be using the analogy of, oh, she's going to give that kitten up for adoption. She turned out all right. You don't know how I turned out. Okay. Let's just be real. Just because we smile and we can laugh and just because I'm sensible does not mean that I don't have issues and questions and things of that. And so what I find, opposed to sitting on someone's couch and talking about it, I find it more therapeutic to talk to people like Coco and Lost Child and Tasha Smith and, and those people, because we have that bond. We have that commonality. We can absolutely sit in a room and be like, oh, yep, that happened to me. Oh, opposed to talking about it with somebody else and they'll be like, really? You don't understand.
Like the only way, like when I all of my cousins are all older than me, and by great lengths, like 10 years plus. And I know in most of their family, it's a number of siblings, different baby dads. So it's different uncles or whatever. And that was the thing I said, you always knew your mother's husband wasn't your dad, but you know who your dad was. And you were allowed to have that relationship with your dad at the teenage years and your early adult years. And I personally know you and your dad, and I've met your dad personally, but I know uncle, who's my aunt's husband. So I've known both sides and all the dynamics, and you were allowed that. That very thing that you were allowed is not just that I got both sides missing, and I wasn't allowed to know either side, to address either side, or ask questions about either side. So that's the only analogy that I've been able to use for the family members who have spoken to me or have reached out or have listened to me, to let them know, like, okay, you knew who your father was, regardless of if you had a relationship with him or not. You knew who he was, and you sought that relationship as an adult later on in life. I'm doing that now so many years later because I wasn't given that ability when I knew at 12, 13, and 14 years old.
It's so crazy. So when you learn this at 12, 13 years old and you can't talk about it, did that change any relationship, let's say in your social life with your friendships? And, did you ever look at them? Because I know that was a thing for me. I would look, I'm like, wow, like to see my friends and how they resembled their parents and how they resembled their siblings. It was kind of like, wow, you look just like mom. Wow, you look just like your dad. Wow, you and your sister and your brother, y'all look just alike. And not knowing who you look like. Did that change anything for you socially?
I don't think it changed. I definitely, I have friends from junior high school and high school that I'm just as close with their moms as, I just gravitated to their families. Family dinners, I ate as many family dinners at other people's houses more so than I did at home in my later teenage years. And I saw what families were, even if it was broken families, just a mom, a single mom. I'm like, yo, my man's is a product of a single mom, but he went to college and he had this and he did this and he did that. I supposedly got two parents at home, but they can't pull it together to do it. My first college application that I gave to the mother because I didn't know the financial part to fill out. She put an X from corner to corner and signed the bottom. And that's why I said I put the pieces together to realize they never wanted me to leave.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious right now?
Yeah. Like I said, and those are the things that led me to believe, like, yo, I was being raised to be the pet. I was never, I was, it was my, I was excited as a kid to learn how to do stuff. I always liked to learn. Whenever the electrician would come over, I would stand at the bottom of his ladder and I learned tools because okay, hand me the flathead screwdriver. That's the one with the flat tip. Okay, I'd hand it to him. Hand me the pliers. So I learned tools. Whenever the plumber came over, I would stand there, hey, what you doing? Hey, hand me that wrench over there. Hand me this, hand me that. I love to learn stuff. So I was excited at about 10 years old when I was taught how to use the washing machine. I didn't realize at that moment that meant I was the washer from that point forward.
Exactly.
So I remember like once in high school, I was about maybe 15 or 16. I started getting slick. So I'm like, all right, I was on my little street thug thing. And I'm like, I'm just going to wear the same thing every day. I'm not putting any dirty clothes in that hamper. So at the end of the week, I don't have anything in there, which means I'm not washing clothes this weekend because none of that stuff in there is mine. And it was a rude awakening when I found out that regardless of whether you got stuff in there or not, get them clothes washed. I said, oh, so that's just my job, period. And I get when some people say, okay, you were being taught responsibility, and it was way beyond teaching responsibility. It was something different going on in that household.
Right.
It was the things that I put together in hindsight now. I get angry about it, but again, it's like you can't cry over spilled milk.
Yeah, it's so hurtful, and even as we deal with our own hurt, when we hear stories, because like I said, every adoption story is different.
Yes.
So even hearing a part of your story, while that was not my story, and while I didn't go through those things, it's still hurtful because it's kind of like, what? Like, how can you raise a child to be this way? Like you said, to be the pet. I have daughters. They're responsible for their laundry and their laundry only. Everyone around here, I do my laundry, I do my husband's laundry, my girls do their own. I just don't understand why that would be even a thing. So you find out, let me ask you this. When you found out you were adopted at 12 years old, did you have that talk with your friends? Did you say, hey, no, you didn't tell anybody?
I didn't start open. I think in high school, I think there was one of my female friends. I don't remember how it came up in conversation, but I remember I told her about it because I remember she was like the only person that I would talk about because she would ask me questions like, because she thought me and the dad looked alike. So she was like, he might be your actual biological father and he had a baby with somebody else and then just raised it with your mom. So we were like, she would throw all these ideas and possibilities at me. But at the time, like I said, it wasn't a conversation that went any further than her. So we would just talk about it just in jest or whatever and then just let it ride. And I didn't have any actual facts or anything to bounce anything off of. So it was her. And then I remember like my best friend, my homeboy, my brother to this day. I think I was maybe like 22 and we were out on the basketball court shooting around and I was just like, yo, I got to tell you something. And I told him just out shooting basketball and he was just like, word. And he was like, okay, I get it now because he remembers in like my high school years, he was like, yo, you hated your dad in high school.
Wow.
And he was just like, I never knew why you hated him because he used to look at it like, yo, you got your moms and your pops. Like, yo, I'm home with just my moms. I don't have that. You got the thing that all of us want. And I couldn't tell people it was all smoke and mirrors. It was a stage play from the outside looking in. It was none of that, but I couldn't tell people that. So when I told him like around 21, 22, he was just like, okay, it makes sense now. And so, I mean, I would tell one or two people here and there, and that was pretty much it. I think in my 20s, as I began dating, I think I would to the young ladies that I was dating, and it was just a part of who I was, and it was just like, yeah, I'm adopted, but I don't know anything, and that's like the end of the conversation because at that point in time, I knew nothing.
Right.
I knew nothing about adoption. I knew nothing of the adoption industry. I knew that there was nothing about finding information or where to. So it was just like, oh yeah, I am, and that's all I know, and that would just be the end of the conversation.
And see, that's the thing. When you don't have anything to talk about, like, when I finally told my girlfriends, like, hey, this is the truth. I know you asked all these years, saying that I don't resemble anybody, but yeah, I was adopted. They were like, how come you never say anything? What am I going to say? Oh, I'm adopted. Right. Story. There wasn't enough information given to me that I could talk about. And I mean, when I tell you, I was believe it or not, I was spoiled. My parents loved me. They gave me all the love in the world. I never felt adopted. That came as an adult. Like I said, when I was 31 years old, that's when it started to, things started to happen and I started to see things. And it was one of those things like, okay, when you stand back and look at things, you can realize blood is thicker than water. Because growing up and in my adolescence and my teenage years, I can ask my mother and father seriously for anything. Oh, can I have this? All right. Can I get this? Yeah. I mean, when I was in college, my parents paid my rent. They did everything for me. So when giving all this love and all this good treatment, and now at 30 years old, and Dad passed away when I was 25, but now that I'm 31 years old, to see how when it's time for us to stick together because we're blood, we're gonna do that. And I mean, yeah, we love her, maybe, but we got to remember she's also adopted. That's how I feel now as an adult. And so it's kind of like, all right, I'm going to play my position. And I'm just going to, stay in the place where I'm comfortable. I'm going to stay in my bubble, and I'm just going to rock out from here with my husband and the family that I actually created. Because what you are not allowed to do is mistreat me because of a story that I did not write. What you're not allowed to do is, judge me because of a story that I did not write. What you're not allowed to do is be disrespectful because of how my story started. I mean, because everyone has a story. Your story may not be adoption. Maybe your story is molestation. Maybe your story is growing up in poverty, in group homes, or what have you. Everyone has a story. So tell your story and let me tell mine. And I think that's where we are so disconnected, because so often everyone wants to live these pretentious lifestyles and make it seem like, oh my God, I have it all together. Do you know I did this? Do you know I did? Do you know I'm in church every Sunday? Yeah, I'm perfect. I have no flaws. Really? And so when you see just how disconnected people are from reality, you know that there's no connection between them and you. So don't allow me to tell my story, and you can do what you want to do with yours. But I just find it so odd that, when we don't have that information, you can relate to me and I can relate to you in that aspect. But, and I remember when I first started to talk about my adoption, my oldest daughter was young at the time. She's now 14. She could have been 2-3 years old. I don't know. I had ran into her daycare teacher in the store. My mom was visiting. And so when I later saw her at the daycare, she said, because I had introduced her to my mom. But what she later said was like, you don't look like your mom. And I said, oh, I was adopted. And her reaction was, oh.
Yeah.
Because naturally you have that. I mean, one of my close friends, I told in 2017, she cried. And it's kind of like, well, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I just want you to understand that I'm now at a point where I can openly discuss my adoption story. And when you have people and their reaction is to cry or feel sorry for you, it almost makes you want to say, you know what, I tried talking about it. I'm not going to do it again, because you can't relate. And your first emotion is to show pity. No, that's not what I want you to do. I want you to get on Ancestry with me and find out who the heck my daddy is. You know what I'm saying? I want you to do 23andMe with me so that I can find out who these people are, because it's like so unfair to us. And yet these are the lives we have to live because somebody handed it off to us. Somebody signed off on a life and chose our lives for us, and we have to live in it. Doesn't make sense that we have to pay for Ancestry, 23andMe. Yeah. State registry. So your adoption obviously was a closed adoption.
Yes.
In New Jersey.
Yes.
It's illegal. I don't care. I will say time and time again. I said this to Coco the other day. Closed adoptions should be illegal. And then when we are of consenting age, we have to spend all of this money, whether you the birth parent finder. I mean, from what I hear, Jay and his crew, they are phenomenal. They are going to find out exactly who your parents are, but that's another cost for us. If you don't do Jay, the birth parent finder, you're doing 23andMe, you're doing Ancestry. Why? And then you have a whole community on Instagram of people who are like, yep, it happened to me. I'm also adopted. I didn't find out until I saw on Instagram, somebody didn't find out until they were like 34 years old.
I've seen a part of I think it's Black to the Beginning. the podcast and Instagram page, I follow their page and listen to every episode of every adoptee story, and they're on like season 3, and it's like 40 some odd episodes per season, so it's quite a few episodes.
Yeah.
And they're both LDAs, late discovery adoptees, and listening to their story, well, not them, it's one of the people that they interview. The lady found out she was adopted at her mother's funeral. The mother died, but I guess the dad must have passed away already because he was already out of the picture. I don't remember exactly the story, but at the mother's funeral, at the repast, one of the mother's friends walked up to the young lady, and she was in her, I want to say her 30s at this point. And the mother's friend said, "I want to applaud you because you never gave your mother a hard time about being adopted." And the lady looked up like, "Who? Adopted what?" And they both kind of had like an oh shit moment, like, "Oh, you didn't know?" Like, "Oh, I just told you." And that found out. So yes, I mean, every story is there's some, like I said, my story isn't the worst, but it's not a worse or better. There's so many different variations of how this thing is interwoven, and the threads start peeling and coming loose, and people was taping it and licking and sticking and trying to hold it together. And yeah, the stories that I've heard are ridiculous. Some of them.
I just cannot believe you would find out after both parents are deceased.
Yep.
That's a lot to take in, and I haven't even heard the story. But the fact that somebody can withhold this information from you your entire life, I mean, how? And then that's the other problem that I have with closed adoptions, because like Coco and I said the other day, not only do the parents not have to tell the child, but in my case, with my brother being in the same town as me, like I said, maybe 10 minutes away. So not only do the parents not have to tell the child, but you will place the child in the same town, and the parents don't even have to talk to each other.
Right.
The parents don't even have to talk to each other. And it's kind of like, what? I very well could have been 16 years old, coming home like, "Oh yeah, I got a boyfriend named so-and-so."
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and then what? After I got butterflies and everything about this cutie pie, well, let's sit down and talk because this could be your brother. Excuse me? That's so unfair to us. And that's the problem that I have with adoption. That, and the fact that after the child is adopted, nobody checks on the child. Nobody is like, you know, after the social worker, after those adoption papers are signed, and it's kind of like, all right, the last name is changed, we're done. Yep. Nobody checks on the child after that. And it's one of those stories. And I'm telling you, I feel like we have to continue to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk some more until, you know, there's something done about this broken system, because it's completely broken. It's completely flawed, you know, and it's kind of like, and who gets the butt of it? We do.
Right.
What?
Right.
You know, it's like a woosah moment at the same time. And so I'm like, you know, but having a community of people to talk to, having you, having Coco, having Tasha, having everybody, Lorraine Joe, she's the adopted chameleon. I'm always speaking about, because she's very knowledgeable when it comes to pre-verbal trauma, and you know how that maternal separation actually has to get tucked in, because you can't verbalize this as an infant. You can cry it out, but a baby crying is not uncommon. So it's kind of like, oh, he's hungry. No, I want my mother. Oh, right. She's sleepy. No, I want my mother. Those things that we don't know about, that we are completely disconnected with, is kind of like, oh, okay, what do we do with it? Well, what do we do with it? We become 45 years old. We look for a community that we have that commonality with, and then we meet strangers and we talk about it. That's what we do. And then when we do that, we're looked at as the crazy ones. No, we're not crazy. It's just time that I deal with this.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Lois, you got it going on. I'm going to, what event do you have coming up so I can put that on Instagram?
I don't really have events. I mean, I hit the local open mics just here in Newark and in the surrounding area as often as sometimes even when I'm at work, I still slide through in my uniform, do what I got to do, and slide back out the door. That's my therapy. That's my woosah. So I touch the stage every now and then just to let my hair down, so to speak, and it does something for me. And I understand it don't. people may not even understand what it does for me. But like I said, I could tell a room full of strangers stuff from 30 years ago, and it does something for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I follow you on Instagram, as you know, and I've seen your spoken word, and I absolutely love it. And one of the things that you said, even just a moment ago, that I saw you, I heard in one of your events, whatever you call it, I heard you say I was adopted, and I was just like, and I mean, it was kind of like a quick statement, and if you weren't, attentive and paying attention, you would miss it. But I was like, I don't know if I heard that because I can relate. It was that line that stood out to me, and I was like, wow, like, so I applaud your courage, because I realize it takes a lot for us to get to that point where, like you said, we can speak to a room full of strangers and just be like, hey, this is who I am. This is who I know I am, but there's a lot of who I am that I don't know. Right. That takes courage, that takes strength, that takes, it takes so much, but at the same time, it's so therapeutic and it's healing. So I applaud you in how you have chosen to heal. And I'm going to make sure I tag you and I put this on Instagram so that followers can check you out. And I'm new on this page, so I don't have a lot, but I just want people to know who you are and that it's okay for us to talk about our stories, because it's our stories. I don't have a story of, obesity. I don't have a story of being neglected as a child, not by my adoptive parents, but everyone has this story. And I heard a lady say before, Shatanice, it was her, Shatanice. She's actually the parent of my younger daughter's friends from the old school. She's on Facebook. But she said something that stuck with me some time ago. She said, our stories are not for us. Our stories are for other people. So the more I open up and share my story, and the more you open up and share your story, it kind of like opens up, I think, another world, so that we understand the importance of sharing our stories, because we'll realize just how imperfect we are. We'll realize by showing vulnerability and being transparent that it is okay, because everyone has a story. And my story may not be your story, but you have a story. Big brother, big sister, you have a story. And instead of living in these pretentious lifestyles, like I said a moment ago, and just showing that humiliation of like, yeah, this happened to me and this is how I've dealt with it, I think it'll get us back to a place where we can understand humanity, because we are completely flawed. We are not perfect people. It doesn't matter who you are. We are not perfect people, but we live these lifestyles and we want people to believe that we are, and we're not. And so because we live these pretentious lifestyles and we grow up feeling like, oh, I don't want people to know, it puts us on a pedestal that we're not supposed to be on, one, and two, we won't know how to handle if we fall. Because how can I be this high, and now that I told this story, now everybody realizes I'm not perfect. Oh my God, you're not. None of us are. So, just talking about it, I think, is helpful to us. And it's so very important that we talk about it, regardless of what your story is. You got to talk about it, because I think it'll help us get back to some sort of humanity. Oh my God, Lois, you got it going on. And, I just want to say thank you so much, and blessings to you and your work that you do, and the stories that you tell, and your daughter, and even her relationship with your adoptive mom, because it's kind of like, the fact that you are courageous enough to trust her, even with your daughter, is, and now that your daughter is an adult, I'm sure you don't have that to worry about, but that right there is a huge feat in and of itself, because if you don't speak to me, even if we don't speak and I can't trust you, leave my kids alone. And I haven't gotten to that point yet where you are. So if you don't speak to me, don't talk to my kids. I'm there.
I allowed them to have their relationship. And when my daughter was in her teenage years, she called me crying one day and she said, Grandma being mean to me for no reason. And I said, yeah, that's just who she is. And I never told you. And I'll wait to see if she would do better by you, or if you would see it on your own. And she saw it on her own. And and I told her, you don't have to go over there if you don't want to. But if you choose to, just let me know and we'll work it out. So they worked out their own relationship. And as a young adult now, she knows I can only do Grandma for 2 or 3 days. And after that, we start arguing. So they have their own little special relationship, and I let them have that.
Yeah. Well, hats off to you and your daughter. I applaud you both. And, like I said, I'm not there yet, and I'm unapologetic. And whoever don't like it, make that a part of your story. I have nothing to do with that. So that's who I am. But thank you so much.